this is a treat. We are going to end with a real treat, again, going back to film and TV roots right here. And then we do have a little tiny short film at the end to show, which I'm very excited about too. But we're in the place of the UN. We're in the UN where we do talk about justice and how we can use our platforms for justice. And I am completely excited to meet all of you, hear from all of you. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage, and you can come after I introduce you, because there is a big step here. Dan Slepian, who is the senior investigative reporter, senior investigative producer at Dateline NBC. John Adrian, JJ Velasquez, co-founder of Voices from Within, and Jason Flom, co-founder and CEO of Lava Media and Lava for Good. Give them a round of applause. This is going to change you guys.
All right. Oops.
Chairs are tricky.
Chairs are tricky. All right. How's everybody doing? That's the first question. They're cool chairs. Okay. That was weak. How is everybody doing out there? Come on, UN, we got to get a little vibe going here. Come on, let's do this. All right, there's a bunch of empty seats up here. If anybody in the back, come fill up these seats because it feels janky. It doesn't, we don't like it. Come on, don't be scared. Come on up. Let's fill up these seats. And anybody who's all the way in the back, move up a little bit. I'm in the entertainment business, so I don't fuck around when it comes to this stuff. Can I curse at the UN? Am I allowed to curse at the UN? I don't know. How do you? I don't curse in only one language. All right, so before we start and before I introduce, okay, now still come on up. You can make noise while you're coming up. Then get quiet. All right. So before I introduce these incredible gentlemen who were just introduced anyway, I'm going to introduce this very short 2-minute video clip, which I think is really going to be an eye-opener. So here we go.
I spent half my life in prison, and that's time we can't get back.
I was embedded with Bronx homicide detectives. There were dozens of police reports that were withheld. I see one that is a bombshell.
Go out there and find the facts in my case. You'll find that I'm innocent.
There's no way he can't be in New York and Florida at the same time.
I felt a responsibility to get to the truth. When I did my investigation, the only evidence was one woman's eyewitness testimony. It is impossible to have seen what she said she saw.
I've been sitting in here wondering whether this mistake will be corrected.
It happens over and over.
What's it gonna take?
Once an innocent person is convicted, it's nearly impossible to get justice.
At that moment, I knew that I was never gonna go back home.
I cry because it's an injustice. Enough is enough! Free the innocent! Free the innocent!
So I lied, it was less than 2 minutes, but that gives us more time to talk, which is great. Does anybody know how many people are in prison in the United States? Anybody want to take a guess? 2 million, good guess, about 2 million. And conservative estimates are that between 100 and 200,000 of them are actually innocent of the crimes they were convicted of. That's a crazy number, it's hard to even process. I'm honored to be here, especially with these guys and with all of you. And I'm here in the shadow and in the footsteps of my father-in-law, who was a UN ambassador for peace. My father-in-law is none other than Muhammad Ali. And his daughter, my wife, would be here, except she brought our little dog with her, and apparently UN doesn't like little dogs. So, yeah, what up with that? I don't know. How are we ever going to have global peace if we don't let dogs in? It's ridiculous. So Kalia was not let in, but he is here. I'm authorized to say that he is here very much in spirit. And he said famously that service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on earth. And that's what we're here to talk about, and how we can use stories to spark change. I made a few notes here, and then I'm going to just go on script for a minute, and then I'll go back off script, sorry. So today is personal for me because I had the privilege, after Dan brought me into this situation, of visiting prison for the first time. Now I've been to dozens of prisons and all around the world and all over this country. In fact, my wife and I went to prevent an execution the day after our wedding in Dallas. Stayed at the Holiday Inn by the airport, pretty romantic in Dallas. But but that changed my life. And I set out with Dan, I joined with Dan to help free JJ. And I'm very proud to say that we were successful and that he's here with us today and doing extraordinary work. Dan is an investigative reporter that if you're unlucky enough to be wrongfully convicted, you're very lucky if you can get him on your case. And the fact is that I've been making a podcast for the last 9 years called Wrongful Conviction. Feel free to whip out your phone and follow it if you want to. JJ was featured on my show, and we've helped to free 32 people so far with the advocacy that we do through media, which is what we're here to talk about. So Dan and JJ's partnership has not only led to the Sing Sing Chronicles, which won an Emmy. Dan will be the first one to tell you that. But he tells me that almost every time we talk. But also the Sing Sing Files book and the Pulitzer finalist podcast, Letters from Sing Sing. I'm a little jealous. Together, they've reshaped how we think about justice, accountability, and the people whose voices have too often been left out of the conversation as they've been marginalized. So today we're going to explore storytelling, how it can fuel reform and transform public perception and inspire global change. That sounds lofty, but let's dive in anyway. So it says I should start with Dan, so I'm going to start with you, JJ. Because so, I mean, after seeing that movie, everybody wants to hear from you. Let's face it, Dan, you and I are just extras in this, presentation. So after 23 years wrongfully convicted, you've turned your personal story into a platform for change. You've become a force for good. And how did being the focus of the Sing Sing Chronicles and other media, wrongful conviction and everything that Dan did, how did that shift how you told your story to the world?
Well, thank you for the question. I would say that when I first started talking about my wrongful conviction and telling people my story, I was conveying it to try to get out of prison. I was conveying it to try to prove my innocence, right? But then I met Dan, and Dan introduced me to the power of media. And I can tell you unequivocally, like the day after the Dateline segment aired, the first segment aired in 2012, February 12, 2012. The DA doubled down and fought for 9 more years to keep me in prison after NBC and Dan Slepian's investigation already proved my innocence, right? But like the next day, I started getting bags of mail that were bigger than the block's mail. And so what I saw was that, okay, we gotta make sure Siri understands what I'm saying, right? So, what it made me realize is that I wasn't just telling my story for me anymore, that I was actually representing a large amount of people that were feeling similar trauma, enduring similar pain, right? And I started to realize, like, through the power of media, and upon my release, coming out to Sing Sing Chronicles, which was a more in-depth and deeper dive. And Dan likes to talk about, going and cutting the blades of grass. Like, he hit every nuance with precision. And that's why it had to be a 4-part series, because of all the work that we did. But Sing Sing Chronicles has broadened the platform in itself. The amount of people that I get to speak to and the level of people that I get to speak to, just like the individuals in this very room, right? Having that opportunity to talk to them and share that story with them, because what we start to learn when we go out and we share our stories is that, like, as many times as I talk about my wrongful conviction, I always meet people who have never heard of a wrongful conviction, who believe in the system, who don't think that this happens on a regular basis, to add up to the amount of hundreds of thousands of innocent people languishing while we're speaking. And so what Sing Sing Chronicles has done is it's challenged me to turn my pain into purpose, not for me, for the people that are sitting in the audience listening to me, right? Let that sink in, because that's why we're here.
And Dan, you've been doing this kind of work for decades, many decades now.
Slow
He's
down
a lot
with the
older than
many
he
decades.
looks.
Like,
He's
That
old.
old.
This man is old as dirt. Don't let the Botox fool you. Okay. So, Dan, you know, and I have the same experience. I mean, we have boxes full of letters from people who want our help. As the founding board member of the Innocence Project, I know how many people are desperate to get their stories heard. And you are inundated. I know that's true. How did JJ's story break through? What about it made you go, I'm not, this is it, right? This is my purpose in life.
yeah. First of all, when you were the founding member, I think I was in high school. I'm just saying, just so you know. Just letting you know.
This shit's getting personal now.
The
We're
short,
gonna need the UN by the end of this.
the short answer is JJ. The bit longer answer is that I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in a middle-class suburb, believing that the justice system worked just the way it should. That, the good guys put the bad guys in prison. If there's something wrong, the system will figure it out, and everybody needs to just do the time for the crime they committed. And I did not know. Growing up, never looked at a police officer with concern that something was going to happen or running away from an officer. And then I started getting into this line of work, and it wasn't. I get inundated today. That's not the way it was when I met JJ. I had done a story about a wrongful conviction about two guys who were wrongfully convicted for a murder that happened in 1990, Thanksgiving night at the Palladium nightclub in Manhattan here on 14th Street. And I was visiting that guy on Thanksgiving Day 2002, which was the anniversary for the murder for which he was wrongfully convicted. And I walked into the lobby of the prison, and there was, I don't want to think about it, image in my head sometimes. It just, this part gets me a little off course, but JJ's mother was standing there holding the hands of these two little boys. The little one was like right up to her waist. The other one was a little taller. And she stopped me and she said, "Are you Dan?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "My son, JJ, is in here and he's innocent." Now, I was there to investigate another case. I didn't really believe her right away. But I looked in the eyes of little Jacob. They were 8 and 5 at the time. Today they're 31 and 27. And I was about to have a child myself. Just found out we were pregnant. And something touched me about that little boy when I looked into his eyes with these, he was looking at me, not saying a word. He didn't say a word to me for the first couple of years, but he looked at me in a way that was like, why am I here? Who are you? And I thought to myself, I don't care if his dad is guilty or innocent. This little boy should not be in a prison on Thanksgiving morning. And I vowed to myself that day to ask, what if she was telling the truth? That started a journey that continues to this day. JJ started to write me letters, and I found this extraordinary human being, a remarkable man that wrote with beautiful penmanship. Letters from Sing Sing was the name of the podcast. Beautiful penmanship, but his words were so strong. He wrote with such intelligence, clarity, grace, that I was drawn in by JJ without even knowing whether he was guilty or not, that he had this remarkable ability to look beyond his own suffering, to elevate the humanity inside prison walls. And he taught me. He thought I was helping him, and in retrospect, he was teaching me. He became my teacher about loyalty, love, resilience, dedication, and truth. And at the same time, I started following and investigating his case. and came across a lot of information, and this took years, that proved his innocence. And I saw that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office simply didn't want to hear it. It didn't matter. I could tell them that this was a microphone and they would call it an elephant. It didn't matter. And so the duality of that, this incredibly powerful human being that I learned to love. JJ is a brother to me. We grew like ivy to this day. And it was through his lens. The previous panel was talking about these issues are too big for people to understand. And I think she was right. The way that I came to really understand not only the epidemic, the hidden epidemic of wrongful convictions. By the way, they say more than 100,000 innocent people right now. For comparison, in the past 40 years, not even 4,000 people have been exonerated in 40 years. So if it's 5% today, that's 100,000 people today, right? So it was through following JJ, following his family, loving him, and at the same time, seeing the truth. You know, we are taught to have this detachment, this rigorous detachment as journalists. And I played that role for a while, and then I realized that I was behaving in a way that I was taught to behave. That I have a responsibility to journalism and truth, but I also have a responsibility to be human. And there came a time where the facts could no longer be ignored. JJ was as innocent as he was alive. And there came a balance there where I had to put my foot on the scale. The world is not flat. The world is round. And JJ was innocent. And so he became the lens through which this experience for me was told. And he opened the door to me to some of those other innocent people you saw in the trailer. He introduced me to several other people I did stories on, and they got out. And he was the last one out. And he only got out, he got out a few years ago. A week from now is the 1-year anniversary of his full exoneration.
How many people here have actually visited a prison? Wow, a lot. That's great. Okay. And I'm sorry those prisons are there for you to visit, but as long as they are, it's important that we make our presence known. And it changed my life the first time I went to visit. My daughter's been teaching in prisons for almost a decade now, so it's a family affair. But JJ, you were able to, and of course, you know, if you visited Sing Sing, you know that place is just, you know, you get to those 40-foot walls, and inside is no less intimidating than outside. Even now, as I go back for how many times I've been there, it never ceases. You know, you get that feeling. It's just this sort of foreboding. It's this sort of like heaviness in the air. And then, you know, you go to the cells, even on honor block, where there are 5x9 or 6x9 foot cells. You know, the warden, you know, proudly told me they're 87 square feet. Not bad. I'm like, well, that's kind of like my apartment. But hey, so that's not funny. But JJ, how did you sort of rise above this environment, which you obviously did, and tell us about Voices from Within in your own words as well, and what that is and what it meant to you.
Sure, they're actually synonymous. You know, like for a long time in prison, I felt helpless, right? In the beginning parts of my incarceration, I couldn't get myself out, no matter who I spoke to, no matter how many times I told my story. I couldn't help my mother. I couldn't help my 2 children that I left behind. One at like 5 weeks old, the other one 3 years old, 3.5 years old. And so like, I really fell into like this swamp, right? Where I was just existing and not even living. And then my mother, like, she saw me like drowning, right, in this abyss, and she was just like, I need to tell you something. I've seen a change in you. You're no longer yourself. You come down here, you put a mask on, you smile in our faces, but I can tell you're losing grips with your own reality. And so she gave me the best advice that she could give me. She said, you know, they can lock up your body. But in your mind, you can remain free. That's your superpower, right? And, you know, like I started to try to like build on that thought. And so then I read this book, and it was about, you know, attaching yourself to this sense of purpose to overcome whatever it is that you face. And a lot of times we feel weak. And, you know, you just had people talking about, you know, mental health and how that leads to people wanting to take their lives. There was a point, and it's not easy for me to express, but there was a point when I wanted to take my own life because I started to feel like this was like living your worst day every day, and there's no change, it's monotonous. Like, I got sentenced to life before I was even 23 years old, right? And so it was like, it was very hard to deal with. And then I started to read, and I started to look in my atmosphere, and I started to try to figure out how I can find purpose in a place that was so desolate. And I started to realize that there were good people in prison who made bad choices, people that I could invest in. I knew how to write well. I knew how to speak well. A lot of these individuals were getting into fights because they didn't know how to express themselves. A lot of these people didn't know how to read and write, so they never had a job, and they had to rob and steal because they thought that's all they were able to do. They thought that was the epitome of their value, right? And so I got together with like minds while I was incarcerated, and we started Voices from Within. And the mindset was like, how do we repay a debt to society? And upon my release, within my first year, I landed in the White House to speak with former President Joe Biden about legal reform, and he apologized to me on behalf of society. He said, like, I don't have a debt to pay. They like society had a debt to pay to me, and I understood that. But I differ, and the reason why I differ is because I am a student of Muhammad Ali, and he said that service is the rent we pay for room on this earth. And so I believe we all have a debt to pay to society because we're all a part of society. We invest in it with our taxes. Why aren't we using our hearts and our mind? Why aren't we taking our lived experience and turning that into the leadership that can create the systemic change that we want to see in this world? And so that's what Voices from Within is about creating those leaders from the inside out, right? Because those that are closest to the solution understand the problem better than anybody else, right? And they also have a dynamic power to use their story, if we teach them how, to impact younger people and to stop this dynamic of mass incarceration from killing humanity, because that's what it's doing. When people live in a 6x9 space for decades at a time, you're taking their life from them. And so what Voices from Within started focusing on was like, you know what? People that are getting sentenced to prison are being sentenced to waste their lives in prison. And I don't believe that that's the purpose of humanity. And so what we've done is we've taught people how to take that time and invest in themselves to become the best version of themselves while they have that time. Not when they're running around out here trying to struggle and figure out how to make it. Figure it out while you're sitting there doing that time, right? And then they come home and they become the leaders of change because they're the ones that were at the bottom and they transformed their lives. People that were told that they were less than human have come out flourishing in humanity. And now they're giving back to the young people to try to stop this dynamic and make the world safer for all of us. A lot of the problems in our world started from poverty, right? Poverty is the father of crime. The mother of crime is the lack of opportunity. So when we don't give people an opportunity to come out of their underserved communities and to try to come and become a part of this matrix of society, right? They're going to try to find a way because that is the survival's path. It's like you have to eat every day. They send people home from prison with $40 and a bus ticket in some states. After you eat your first meal, what's going to happen next? Let me tell you what the sad reality is. The sad reality is that an individual, particularly those that have done 10 or 20 years for violent crimes, when they come home to their communities, they'll be given guns and drugs before they'll be given jobs and housing. And that's why recidivism rates have soared for decades, and that's why we have the crime rates that we do.
So here I am, right? This guy who thinks there's good guys and bad guys, and I'm told JJ was convicted of murdering a retired police officer in New York City who was running an illegal numbers parlor in Harlem. I was told 5 eyewitnesses picked him out, and his co-defendant pled guilty and said JJ committed the crime with him. So here I am going into this prison, and I meet him. This is like Plato and Socrates put together, right? And we're talking about narrative storytelling. JJ changed my narrative, and for so many years, we would sit across the visiting room table and talking about, like, why is this happening to you? JJ taught me this term that we use all the time now called quantum entanglement, that everything happens for a reason. And I came to believe, and we actually talked about this 15 years ago, if not longer, in the prison, with me saying to him, I actually think that you're the chosen one. I think that you're not done here yet. The universe needs you to be here because you need to experience and walk through this fire to understand it and be able to articulate it in a way that other people can't, so you can get out and change it. I visited him more than 250 times at Sing Sing over 20 years. And a lot of that was selfish because I felt like I was going to church every time I went into that visiting room. I went on my birthday every year the last decade to visit him because he has so much. He was a leader on the inside. He's a leader on the outside. And not only did he teach me about wrongful convictions, he taught me about the pathology of mass incarceration. Together we worked on Voices from Within. Walking through those residential blocks, you see those cells. I promise you, if you saw them, if those of you talk about dogs, for those of you who have dogs, the first thought, I literally would not board my dogs for one night in the cell that he had to live in for 24 years. And so this destruction of a human, stripped of who he is, he was not even, people didn't call him by his name. Officers didn't call him by his name, they called him by his number. He was stripped. He wasn't allowed to wear clothes, he had to wear a uniform. Does that sound familiar, what happened, earlier in the 20th century? To strip people of their dignity for all of us on the outside to feel that that's okay, because those are bad people. And those quote unquote bad people that JJ introduced me to, some of whom did commit crimes, are some of the closest people in my life. They're my family now. And that's all because of JJ.
Yeah, I want to add to that. The great Brian Stevenson, one of my favorite quotes from him, he said, I believe everyone is better than the worst thing they've ever done. And I think it's important for us to view those people who society has decided are bad people and deserve to be punished, tortured for their transgressions. I think anyone here, if you'd have a quiet moment and reflect on the worst thing you've ever done, you wouldn't want to be judged by that. No one would. And I think, too, to pick up on what you were saying, I've been saying for years that we as a society, if we want to be healthy, in America, 11 million people cycle in and out of jails and prisons every year. 11 million. And what we should do is build ramps outside the prison walls so they can get back to their community, back to their family, back to their job, back to their sports, whatever it is, their church if that's your thing. Instead, we build walls outside the walls. And that's something that I think, gatherings like this, hopefully we can help to lead to changing that. We have 2 minutes left. I want to leave a minute for each of you guys for closing arguments. We'll call it closing arguments. I want to thank everyone for listening. My podcast is Wrongful Conviction. You'll hear a lot of stories like JJ's, including JJ's, so check that out. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and then JJ, you go last. You take us off into the sunset.
I didn't know we're, all right.
Yeah, we're at a little rush job here.
Yeah.
Speed dating. Come on, Dan.
Here's what I'll say is that the narrative that you've been told and that we're told every single day is a narrative of fear. We're told that New York City is terrifyingly dangerous. Chicago is dangerous. Watch it, right? The facts is that there were 2,245 murders in New York City in the year 1990. Last year was the lowest number of murders on record in the history of New York, 370 something murders.
That's true nationally as well.
So this narrative that we're being told every day is not true. It's about otherism. And what it allows us to do is build these systems like prisons and this system that's by design. We build these systems to make people in the community think you need to be punished. I toured prisons in Germany and Norway who think about incarceration completely different. They think about it human dignity. Over there, officers are trained not only in police work but in social work. A good day there is for an officer to make sure somebody doesn't come back to prison. Here is a good day to go home alive. There, you wear your own clothes. You close a door in your room. You're called by your name. You have to go to school. You have to eat fresh food. You have to have job training. Here, you're stripped of your dignity. You're put in a uniform. You're given a number. You're lucky to eat fresh food. You're lucky to go to school. And you're lucky to get job training. And so what that does is it creates the structure for we are paying more money based on the emotional way we feel. We're paying more money to make ourselves as a society less safe because crime is an emotional issue and people react to it with emotion and not objectivity. So when we talk about these stories, don't take the tropes. Not everybody in prison is innocent, says they're innocent. It's just not true, even though it might seem intuitive. The use of the word inmate. People don't even realize that that's actually an issue. I was just talking earlier, on my network at NBC, Tom Brokaw, who's still alive, who did the news in my lifetime, in the 1970s, there are news reports when he went on the air and said 4 Negroes were shot yesterday, right? We don't use that terminology. Words matter. And when we use the word inmate, it reduces a person to their worst act. It is a term that allows the society, he tells me my word count is always too long. Society
it's the longest 1 minute of my life, by the way.
Dude, this is like 1:45 right now.
Still a good speech, though. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty good.
Where was I? About inmate?
145.
And ladies,
you got what I'm saying. Words matter.
Words matter.
And don't take and spread this message. I never did this to tell a story. I did this because I was living it. And the best gift that JJ has given me is a lifestyle, is a cause, and the ability to share our story with other people so you can take the torch and become lanterns of knowledge in your own community. 243 or something like that.
That was the problem with that was that I was supposed to get a minute, right?
I think they'll be okay.
No, I'll keep it very short. I think that, we've learned a lot in this conversation, right? I think what we need to learn, and something for all of us, this isn't about people that are incarcerated. This isn't about, being wrongfully convicted. Think about the power of being able to tell your story, right? Because we all have stories to tell. We all live, maybe everybody doesn't live in their truth. I know I do. I hope you do. And you have to stand firm in that, right? But also realize, there was a narrative written about me. And the narrative that was written about me labeled me a cop killer, labeled me the scum of the earth, labeled me a person who would never see society again. We rewrote that narrative. And so you can rewrite your narratives. You can change your life. And you can do it simply by starting to make a choice to do it. And then starting with that choice, make other choices that will lead you to the path that you were born to be in. Because I wasn't born to be in a prison. And I had to fight hard to get out. But I can tell you something. Going to prison took everything from me. And people who experience that level of loss end up, if you survive it, with the biggest sense of gratitude. And so I'm grateful to be here today. I'm grateful to share space with all of you. And I hope that you can take this and share it with somebody else so that they can be grateful too. Thank you.
That was a literal mic drop.